Hey guys, it's Ornlu, and in case you didn't know, we are pretty much in the middle towards the end of the King of the Desert 4 Arabia tournament, the big $75,000 tournament organized by MEM, sponsored by Microsoft, all of that stuff. And also, in case you did not know, the version of Arabia that they use in that tournament is also the ladder version of Arabia right now. So it's been a while since we've done a good old Arabia tier list. You know, pretty much like the first video I ever made for this channel was just me rambling about a 1v1 Arabia tier list. Now we have Tier Maker to help us out, so let's go ahead and run through this with the civs, and hopefully I will try and inevitably fail to be brief. So before I jump in, obviously, this is all just my opinion, man. It is based somewhat off of the results that we're seeing in KotD4 so far, but I am sort of having the caveat here that this tier list is going to be for the ladder and not for KotD in terms of like tournament picking, I guess, and counter picking, which does lead to a little bit of a difference in meta, which I will explain in a little bit. But yeah, obviously, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Definitely, if you enjoy this, do all the liking and commenting and subscribing and all of that stuff. So without further ado, let's get into this. So as you can see, I've kind of split up my tier list a little bit differently than I normally do. We have our S tier, which is going to be like the very, very best civs. You are likely, if you want to go full tryhard, you pick these civs, and we are seeing these civs banned all the time in almost every single set. In fact, I believe these are the 3 civs that are picked or banned in every single set in KotD4. I've split the A tier into A and A-, simply because there's enough of a difference between like the A and A- tier that, okay, they're, you know, some civs are a little bit better qualitatively and quantitatively, but it's still less of a difference than like a full tier. And then I did the same thing for B and B-, and then C tier are just the civs that we really don't get to see all that much on Arabia, simply because they're better on other map types. So I am just going to be going in alphabetical order here. This tier list specifically is missing the Lords of the West and Dawn of the Duke civilizations, but I like this one the best in terms of like all the other AoE2 tier maker civ lists out there, because it has the emblem and the name of the civ, so it's not like you have to know the emblems. So I'll just go ahead and edit those in at the very end with some amazing Ornlu editing magic. So with all of this in mind, let's go. Starting, of course, with the Aztecs, and as always, Aztecs are going to be in the S tier. Honestly, the best 1v1 Arabia civ right now. The meta, it's very dominated by aggression, namely in the form of men-at-arm rushes or quick archer play, and Aztecs are great at both. You can go for drushes just fine. Eagle warriors are a potent unit as always, and, you know, Aztecs, they have been and always will be a top Arabia civ. Berbers will be going into the B tier. We've seen the civ played a lot in KotD4, but that's also just because it's never good enough to be banned, but it is good enough to be played, at least with relative frequency. And that's what we're going to see a lot of these B tier civs. And of course, for your regular ladder play, if you really want to go for like laming, Berbers are one of the best civs for that, if you really, really want to make your opponent's life sad. But beyond that, of course, you have Camel Archers, just such a deadly unit in most matchups, and then you have your Knights and Cavaliers and Camels and stuff being cheaper. All of that is very good. You are missing an eco bonus, though. The faster moving villagers, it's not really an eco bonus. So that does prevent them from being higher up here, but still, against most civs, if you're just, you know, making it to Castle Age in a relatively even footing, then you are going to be doing quite well for the rest of the game, so Berber is going to comfortably be in the upper half of B tier, so to say. Next up will be the Bratons, and they will be going into the A tier. Britons are, you know, they're still a very strong Arabia civ. They can do the aggression with the whole men-at-arm rushing, and they can go into straight archers super well, and that is both of those are really helpful in the current metagame. Good economy in Castle Age, of course, with your cheaper town centers. Longer range archers can be really oppressive in some matchups. They're not quite, you know, to the tippy top level because they do lack mobility. Their best units are all quite slow, you know, your archers, your infantry, your trebuchets, all that stuff. So they're not quite S tier, but they're still just a very solid, you know, straightforward A tier pick. I don't think anyone's going to be too shocked with that placement. Bulgarians will unfortunately be finding themselves in the C tier. Note that there is no D tier. All of the civs are at least playable on Arabia. Like, it's not out of the world, out of the question that you would be seeing these civilizations, and you can very comfortably go into, you know, full random civ Arabia on the ladder and be pretty much fine. That said, some civs are just not that well suited to Arabia. Bulgarians are kind of borderline, but I'm still going to put them in C, just because lacking Crossbowman is such a huge deal, and you don't really have an eco bonus, but on the other hand, you do have amazing aggressive potential with your free men-at-arms upgrade, and, you know, Ornlu, you said that aggressive men-at-arms play is like the meta. Aren't Bulgarians one of the best civs of that? Yes, they are, and that's why I'm, like, still a little bit hesitant to put them in C tier. The civ just really lacks that flexibility and that economy to really make them played all that much more often. And yes, you can go, like, men-at-arms into scouts, but that usually delays your castle age time a lot, which is kind of an issue. But, you know, Bulgarians, they're all right, but not anything that you would, you know, really be too amazed with. In a similar vein, we have the Burmese. For very similar reasons as Bulgarians, your men-at-arm rush is fantastic. You get the free lumber camp upgrades, meaning you don't need to spend the 100 food and 50 wood on double bit-axe in early feudal age, and your men-at-arms get +1 attack. So your men-at-arm rush is literally one of the very, very best in the game, but you don't have leather archer armor, which means that you're so weak to strong ranged unit civs in the mid-game, like, I don't know, say Britons, that you're kind of forced to go for, like, monks or infantry or knights or something like that. And although your eco is nice, it's not, you know, amazing. Arambai, they can be good, but you're just really missing that flexibility when it comes to having strong archer play and counter archer play. So for that reason, Burmese, they are still a playable civ. People might think that Burmese are just terrible and I should include a D tier just for them. No, they're not that bad, but they are still going to be in the C tier. Good old Byzantines, going to be in the A tier. Definitely an up-and-coming civ, despite it literally being in the game since Age of Kings. Byzantines are a flexible civ. Like, they have everything that Bulgarians and Burmese lack. Having those cheap trash units means that you are just a very potent threat against almost every civ in the game, and a ton of civs are heavily reliant, especially on cavalry. Having both cheap spearmen and cheap camels really makes a lot of cavalry-heavy civs, it makes them quite scared. And then the cheap skirmishers are good against the archer civs, and when you're in this much more aggressively oriented meta, Byzantines can shine because they are good defensively, right? They can absorb the aggression much more comfortably. You win tower wars, you have the extra HP on your buildings, which also enables you to win tower wars, but, you know, with houses having negative melee armor now, palisade walls being weaker than ever, Byzantines having that relatively extra HP can just help you survive, absorb your, you know, opponent's attacks, and then get to Imperial Age more quickly. It's not an eco bonus, but it's kind of like a replacement to an eco bonus, because even though you don't have extra resources coming in, the fact that Imperial Age is so cheap means that you can hit these really, really deadly timings with arbalests. Elite Skirmishers going into Halbs, I mean, they can do pretty much everything. Definitely not quite S-tier level because you don't have, like, just an overwhelming presence on the map. You do have to play maybe a little bit more conservatively with Byzantines than most civs, but if you play them well, as we've been seeing in the tournament so far, they are a deadly, deadly force. Celts are going to be going into the A- tier. Celts, you know, there is the whole Hoang style with 1TC super heavy Castle Age aggression, and that is one thing you can do with them, but they also do the men-at-arms rush very well, because you get the faster movement speed on your men-at-arms, of course, in Feudal Age, and that allows you to chase down enemy villagers much more comfortably. It allows you to pick engagements against other men-at-arms rushes, which is very important. And then the faster working lumberjacks is just so helpful when it comes to, you know, literally any strategy at any point in the game. It's just, you know, a very, very powerful, generally applicable eco bonus. Faster attacking siege units is fantastic for, well, your mangonels and your rams, even scorpions, actually. But where you run into problems is just, same as always with Celts, late Castle Age, early Imperial Age. You need to be making some sort of heavy switch into something, namely infantry and siege, and although infantry are more viable, both in terms of swordsman line and woad raiders, it's still not something that you can easily afford in, like, early to mid game, because it requires a lot of food investment. You're trying to get your eco up and going. I think that Celts still have some room for experimentation with the more infantry heavy style, but until we really see a lot of that, you know, played out successfully, I can't really justify them higher than the A- tier. Alright, next up is going to be the Chinese, and this is kind of an interesting one. I'm going to just jam them up in there into S tier because they are still amazing, but that is again with the caveat that I'm not sure how great they are in a super aggressive meta. Chinese, despite, you know, whatever pro players will try to attempt with them, they're not a civ that love going for drushes, they're not a civ that like going for men-at-arms rushes. They like clicking up to Feudal Age a little bit later. If you have a super smooth Dark Age, then yes, you can get a nice uptime. And I will say that with the fact that the New Arabia has 400 food on your elephants and rhinos as opposed to 340 food on wild boar, and you have your, zebra, ostrich pretty easily lurable as well. It can bolster that early food income that you need with Chinese to sort of get you over the hump, and they are still a strong civ for all of the reasons that they've been since we've made maps much more consistent, but still, they are a bit vulnerable in terms of early aggression, and they are a little bit weak as well to the American civs with lots of eagle warriors and whatnot. So they are still an S tier civ because they have so many great matchups, but it is still going to be a little bit tricky to play them, and there are situations where you can just get completely run over if you have a bad map gen, which is totally possible on the current Arabia version. But still, if you're able to get going with them, you've got strong cavalry, strong archers, strong economy. It's really all you need in life. Fully upgraded halberdiers, siege rams as well. Like, yeah, I mean, they're Chinese, right? Cumans are going to be finding themselves in B-, not on the same level as Berbers, and they did just get a small nerf where their archery ranges and stables now cost 100 wood instead of 75 wood. It's still a fantastic discount. The 2 TC boom potential is very strong, but they're just a very tricky civ to play. This meta is very aggressive. That means that humans are going to have a harder time getting away with their 2 TC boom. We saw a really, really good game between the Viper and Say My Name, where Viper went for the Coomer Boomer, and Say My Name was, I believe, Huns, and just went for a ton of aggression. And it can be really punishing for humans. I won't spoil that game, but it was actually very, very close and back and forth. It's kind of a rough matchup still when you're up against any sort of super strong aggressive civ, especially in early Castle Age, because as humans, you're typically later up to Castle Age. So it's like, can you survive, can you survive, can you survive? And then you're in a fantastic spot with your super speedy army that's also pretty strong. But it's still a tricky civ to play, so that's why they are going to be sticking in B- tier. Next up will be the Ethiopians, and they are going to be joining Berbers in the B tier. Great all-around archer civilization. They have their strong power spikes, they've got a great men-at-arm rush, their faster attacking archers are just a very potent threat. It's kind of like having the faster attack speed of Thumbring innately for free, and then you can also research Thumbring on top of it. Free pikeman upgrade can be really nice in, again, a meta that's very heavily defined by cavalry and mobility. But you yourself are not mobile as Ethiopians. Ethiopians are slow still. We did have an amazing game with Vinchester where he was able to make great use of the Showtell Warrior. It's still a situational option. There is some room for potential here, and it's like all of the B-tier civs, they're good civs. You're going to be at least fairly happy landing them, if you're going random on the ladder. But still, you are missing a sort of long-term economy bonus, and you're a little bit slow and a little bit more one-dimensional than I think, you would really, really prefer in a civilization, but good option nonetheless. Frankers, going to be going into the A tier. Franks, they're Franks, right? They're straightforward, great cavalry, scout rush. You can actually go for men-at-arm rush pretty comfortably as well due to the great food income you get early on. And getting horse collar for free means that in late feudal age, early castle age, you're not having to spend those resources when you otherwise would be if you didn't have horse collar. And in this meta, horse collar is very difficult to afford in most situations. If you're not going for a scout opening, chances are you're not getting horse collar until, you click up to castle age. And I know this seems like pretty insignificant. I mean, it's just 75 extra food, but it really does make a big difference when it comes to your timings, because turns out, early Castle Age, you need a ton of wood. Yeah, Franks are just always going to have that consistently, and then you have your cheap castles, your knights, Frank things. They still lack a little bit in terms of flexibility, especially when you're up against Cav Archer civs. Franks don't love facing Cav Archers, man. Your Skirmishers are sad, you're kind of reliant on just getting good trades with knights, but that's not always possible, I guess, and Cav Archers themselves are also quite popular. So, Franks, they do have some weak points, but they're still super solid and consistent across the board. Goths. C tier. A little sad for Goths. Your men-at-arm rush is okay. You don't have to spend any villager time mining gold if you want to make 3 militia, but you'd still need to spend gold or mine gold if you want to get the men-at-arm upgrade. You do get an extra villager, on the way to feudal age, because, you get loom instantly. And you do have fantastic laming potential, but you're still very one-dimensional. I mean, Goths do infantry. Infantry have been buffed, and I still think that there is a lot of room for experimentation. I've been playing games with infantry civs and, going mass infantry, and been having a decent amount of success. But I am also big noob, and what works in my pleb 1700 elo games may as well not work at the highest levels of play, shall we say. So there's definitely some room for experimentation, but just missing that flexibility and that eco, it just kind of hurts a lot, and in a ton of matchups. That said, Goths are going to always be a potent pick in tournaments because they have some incredibly oppressive matchups. Obviously, against Mayans is the most famous, but they can also do work really against any archer civ, or really any civ that has bad infantry. So Goths, they have their niche uses, but on average, when you're sort of facing the board of all other 38 civilizations, you're not loving life. Huns are Huns, as a certain tournament host would say. And they will be going into the A tier as well. Huns are definitely seeing a little bit of a resurgence, which is great because it's obviously the classic Arabia civ. In a meta that is more aggressive and focused on more open play, hey, what do you know, Huns are great. They can go for any sort of early game opening. You can go for men-at-arms, drush, scouts into archers, into cav archers is like the super smooth Hun play if you can get away with it. And you just get a ton of wood savings. The fact that you have that cav archer play and that knight play, both being incredibly powerful in mid-game, means that you can usually go for something incredibly powerful in most matchups. And then, of course, in late game, you have the faster working stables still helping you out with your hussar spam. You've got the halberdiers if you need them. They're not great halberdiers, but at least you have them. And they're just, you know, strong, solid, flexible, aggressive civilization on a map that's open and a meta that's aggressive. So Huns are great. All right, next up is going to be the Incas, and they will be also in the A- tier. I was really debating, you know, between Incas being an A- or B. Like, they're pretty close, but I still think that they can squeak into the A- tier. We have seen several players in KotD4 utilize the civilization quite effectively. Their cheaper towers means that you still have a really scary tower rush, even without your, you know, villager rushing, you know, Noboru shenanigans. The smooth Dark Age you get from the free llama and the houses that provide double the pop space, it actually is very noticeable. You just get a super clean Dark Age, you rarely have any idle TC time, you're fantastic at laming, you're fantastic at just applying a ton of pressure, and where I think Incas are going to excel is you have that mobility that, say, Ethiopians lack, because you have Eagle Warriors, and you also have just strong counter options to pretty much everything. Berbers, they don't really have the aggressive potential of Incas, unless you're counting laming, but Incas, it goes beyond the laming thing. And although they don't quite have the eco to make it any higher than, like, A- tier, they have all of the flexibility you need. No, they don't have as much speed as, like, an actual cavalry civ. Also, thank you, Space and Spoon, for the follow. Yeah, always forget to turn those notifications off. Go follow my Twitch channel at Ornlu_AoE in case you haven't already. There we go, sellout. But Camioks can also be a really potent addition, and they are fairly strong against archer civs in general. There was a really fantastic game between the Max and Winchester when it was Incas versus Britons, and the Max did a really nice job leveraging the strengths that Incas have over a civ like Britons, who are just reliant on that sort of slow push across the front. They're a little bit more awkward of a civ to play, but you got Eagle Scouts, and you have strong aggressive potential, and you also just have so many great counter units that I think Incas still squeak into A- tier. Oh boy, Indians. Okay. This civ is like the #1 reason that I am specifically making this about ladder and not about tournaments. Because if we're looking at KotD4, then the Incas, or Indians rather, should be in A tier. I'm going to put them in B tier. So the thing with KotD4 is that you have 3 bans per player, 3 global bans. So you can ban 6 civilizations. In doing that, you're almost always banning Aztecs and Mayans, and you're getting in these situations where you're able to remove the worst matchups for Indians, which is against the American civs, who are otherwise going to be running around everywhere on ladder. And especially because most of the picked civilizations in KotD4 beyond that, you know, we're looking at Berbers, Tatars, Khmer, Franks, Mongols, like all of that stuff. Like, you get a lot of good matchups when it comes to, like, drafting, where Indians have a great chance to shine. We've been seeing them for their cav archer play as much as their camel play, which is definitely a nice utilization of, you know, an aspect of the civ, having those fully upgraded cav archers. They do have some nice moments. Their eco is just super flexible. It doesn't give you more resources, at least not directly. It doesn't give you, like, a faster income, but it means that you have more food savings that you can then spend on military units. So the way I tend to classify the Inca, or why do I keep saying Incas? That was the last civ. The Indian economy is not that you get resources faster, it's that you can make villagers and army at the same time, which gives you the ability to, well, build up your economy and be aggressive out on the map. And they do just have some amazing matchups. Like, Indians versus Huns, if the Huns can't close it early, Indians just almost always win late game. It's really, really difficult for Huns to do anything. It's going to be a similar story with Mongols or Magyars or anything like that. Tatars are going to be having a rough time too. So for those reasons, Indians are kind of like Goths, right? They have some really, really strong matchups and some really weak matchups. However, compared to Goths, Indians have a good eco, which really is kind of the tipping point, right? And camels, you could say, are slightly more viable than infantry, but also with Indians you have a bit more flexibility because you have the cav archer play as well as the camel play. Late game you at least have hussars. They're not that great, but at least you get one extra pierce armor in early imp or something like that. I mean, that's exactly the case, but you get the idea. You also have gunpowder, hand cannons, and bombard cannons both as options. So for ladder play, I'm going to be putting them in B tier, but again, if we're looking at KotD4, then we're going to be putting them in A tier, but that's mostly a tournament civ draft meta thing. Italians. I believe in the group stage, Swiss stage of KotD4, they've been played once, and that game was Hera, and that was one of the craziest games of the tournament. It's like the game that was Verdun, AoE2 edition, where it was like 1,500 kills or something like that. Super long game. I'm going to put them in B- tier. They're somewhat reminiscent of Ethiopians in that they're an archer civ, and then they have, you know, the nice timing potential with the cheap uptime. But unlike Ethiopians, their archers aren't any better than regular until you get Pavisa in sort of late Castle Age, early Imperial Age, which is a very strong tech, actually. In archer shootouts, the -1 damage that you take is a big deal. You have Genoese Crossbowman as an option in late game against cavalry civs. Don't tell that to Hera, but you can do that. You have the strong cavalry as with Italians. Unlike most archer-centric civilizations, you also have good cavalry. You have fully upgraded hussars, fully upgraded cavalier, and that gives you a sort of mobility that is not often seen with archer civs, right? Really Chinese, like, they have pretty good cavalry as well. You see that with them, but you don't see it with Britons, you don't see it with Ethiopians, you don't see it with Mayans, I guess, unless you can go for Eagle Warriors, but at that point, if you're going Eagle Warrior plus Archer as Mayans, then you've probably won the game already. But you get the idea. Italians, they're not the strongest civ out there. I wouldn't even put them on the same level as, you know, Berbers, Ethiopians, Indians, but they're definitely not C tier. Japanese, gonna be going in the B tier. This is a civ that I actually think is underplayed in KotD4, and for ladder play as well, it's going to be really strong. Hey, guess what? We're in a meta that favors early men-at-arm rushes, and then also quick archery range plays, like going 19 pop archers or something like that. Hey, Japanese are great at doing both of those things. Their aggression with the Japanese faster attacking men-at-arms it's like one of the scariest things in the game. I say all the time, the scariest unit in the game is the Japanese men-at-arm. You mix in a spearman too, and it's going to make scout openings really difficult. If for some reason you feel like you need to open fast archers, all of the wood savings you get from your cheaper drop-off sites can really let you go for a quick uptime and also get to those archer plays more quickly. And then from there on, you do miss an eco bonus. You know, after like early game, the cheaper drop-off sites really stop to become very relevant. But in like very aggressive situations where you're not like in a big boom off, which is pretty common these days, Japanese, they just have tons of options. You have great pikemen. Your swordsmen are good, and I still think that swordsmen are a very underexplored option these days. But you have a great archery range. In mid-game, your knights are totally fine. You've got +2/+2 bloodlines, husbandry, and it's really only in late game that you start to drop off. And I think that, yeah, they're just a good, solid civilization. You've got good monks, too. Not a whole lot to complain about with Japanese. I think we honestly should be seeing them a little bit more, and if you get them on ladder, definitely just reach out and slash your opponent in the face with your swordsman. Khmer, I'm gonna be putting them in A-. Khmer are in kind of a weird spot. In some situations, they can just be amazing because their eco is top tier. You can go for a very quick scout rush or archer rush since you don't need to build that barracks, and that's, you know, sick. Just save a ton of wood. You're getting, you know, comparable to Japanese wood savings early on if you're able to pull that off. But you also don't love facing a ton of aggression yourself. If Khmer are going for men-at-arm rushes or feel like they need to go for a drush, you're losing a huge part of that bonus from not needing to build the barracks in Dark Age. If you go for like a scout war and you don't build the barracks, well then you can't add in spearmen. Yes, you can make that work by like going for double stable scouts or just making sure that you're walling and then going for a quick archer follow-up behind it, but it is a bit awkward. In mid-game, you do have strong scorpions. Your archers are missing thumb ring though, so it's not like you love committing to them, but you still have arbalest. Like, their archer play is totally fine. They actually have a really bad win rate in KotD4. I haven't looked back exactly on like where those losses are all coming from, I still think that they're a solid A- tier civilization. You have a great eco, you have strong cavalry, and you have, you know, reasonably strong archers, pretty good siege, but it's still not the cleanest civ in the world when it comes to having a smooth early game. Koreans, gonna be in the B- tier. They're not at the level of, you know, the C tier civs, but they're not the most suited towards very open aggressive maps. They're a slow civilization, they don't have an eco, tower rushing is not what it used to be, but you have the cheaper wood cost on all of your military units except siege units, and you've got the free archer armor upgrades, which is really helpful, and you also have a really strong late game if you're able to, you know, pull that off. If you're able to get to their late game as Koreans, you're going to be smashing, and especially if you're up against archer civs, because you've got the free armor upgrades to help you survive better in early game, and then eventually if you get to war wagons, then you're just, you know, laughing your way to victory. It's still a very different way you need to play. You need to play more defensively with Koreans, unless you're going for like a super crazy offensive tower rush, which, like I said, isn't quite as good these days. But as far as like mid-game towers, you can actually do that totally fine. Guard towers are as strong as ever, and just, you know, trying to go for like a mid-game push with towers, I've seen it be very effective. But if we compare them to, say, Byzantines are just a lot more flexible, and they have the faster Imperial Age potential, whereas Koreans are just slow. So that's why they're going to be in the B- tier. A deadly civilization in certain situations, but not at the consistency. Nor do they have the aggressive potential for to be any higher. Speaking of aggressive potential here, Lithuanians are going to find themselves in the A tier. Starting with 150 extra food is really good. You can go for an insanely fast uptime. Realistically, I'd say that only Lithuanians, Mongols, and Khmer can go for like a very consistent 18 pop uptime without really having a bunch of idle TC time. And just having that option means that you can go really aggressive with scouts, you can go right into archers, you can go for like 19-20 pop men-at-arms. I've seen it with like pushing in an ostrich or two. Having that extra food is really helpful in that regard from your elephants. I know Lithuanians starting with extra food might make you think that having the extra food on your elephants isn't as good, but it actually means that you're even more consistent at going for these really fast uptimes. And if you're able to take an advantage in feudal age and can sort of coast towards castle age, you have your faster moving trash units, or spearmen and skirmishers, both of which are incredibly powerful. Faster moving spearmen means that you can better chase enemy scouts, and in mid-game, you know, you can better chase enemy knights. You are still slower. Still, you have to be very, very careful when microing against Lithuanians. Then faster moving skirmishers can be really oppressive against archer civs, because it means that you can't disengage well with your archers. The skirmishers, you know, they run in, and you try and run away and, you know, poke back with your archers normally. But Lithuanians, they just charge in at you, and you can't really run away very well at all. And then on top of that, you've got great knights, and then you have your monks that, you know, power up your cavalry with their relics, and you just have so many potent military options that I definitely see them as a strong A-tier civilization. The one thing that they lack is anything resembling a mid-game eco bonus or anything past early game. So they are going to be missing out on S tier. I don't think they're quite at that level, and if you're playing a sort of a very sort of standard macro game and you're not able to do anything early on, you're going to be falling behind a lot of other civs, actually. So a civ that definitely thrives in specific situations, like setting themselves up for a good mid-game with like an aggressive early game, but that's not always going to be the case. So yeah, good A-tier civilization, one that is very frequently banned in KotD4 notably, just because it's so annoying to play against in a lot of situations. Magyars. Magyars are going to be going into the B tier. They're kind of like Huns. I mean, they're very similar to Huns, but you miss out on the mid-game, especially when it comes to economy. I mean, Magyars don't have an eco bonus. They're one of the very few civs in the game that have, like, no eco bonus. You can go for a very strong men-at-arm rush because you get the free forging upgrade, so it's kind of like your Burmese in that regard. But you don't have anything else to really help you with that. Burmese also get the free woodcutting upgrade, remember. And, of course, you can go for scouts with Magyars, but you don't have anything to give that lets you get a super fast uptime. Like Huns, Khmer, Mongols, Lithuanians, they can all go for much faster uptimes than Magyars, because Magyars don't get anything good for their economy or scouts until feudal age hits. And then, of course, once feudal age hits, then you have great scouts. But then, even there, you don't have much of an eco after it. Of course, if you get to super late game with Magyar Hussars and, you know, Magyar Cav Archers, then you're just having a field day. But it's kind of tricky to get there. But still, you have your strong timings. Their scout rush is still very, 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 very good. Mid-game play, if you can get into Cav Archers, it's kind of hard because you don't have an eco bonus, and you don't have any bonus to your Cav Archers, remember, until you get Recurve Bow, which is 600 wood, 400 gold, I believe, in the Imperial Age at the castle. So realistically, recurve bow is only going to come in very certain situations, like only in late game. So it's like, yeah, you can go Cav Archers as Magyars, but in most situations, Indians are actually going to be doing Cav Archers better just because they have a better economy. So they're a bit awkward, but still fantastic timing opportunities. Early Feudal Age, Post-Imperial Age, even a little bit in like early Castle Age with their free iron casting and stuff. Just not the most consistent of civilizations throughout the game. Malay C tier. Malay liked Arabia a lot more when it was easier to go for like walls, you know, Drush, Fast Castle, that sort of thing. Kind of like Chinese, they just don't really have the ability to go for men-at-arm rushes too comfortably because the faster uptime means that you very rarely have the resources you need to go for like men-at-arms and your eco upgrades and consistent TC production. Of course, if you can survive that, then you're going to be in an amazing spot as Malay. But it's still very awkward in the early Feudal Age, and even from that point onward, you don't have the most flexible tech tree in the world. Karambits can be really good in some situations, but they're still pretty situational. Your archers, arbalests are fully upgraded, but they don't have any sort of military bonus. Same with your skirmishers and halbs. Again, they're not a bad civ, right? They still do have a great eco, because advancing to the next age faster is like, it's 2 extra villagers on the way to Feudal Age. You know, effectively in terms of TC time, and then like 3 in Castle Age. It's just kind of other civs do that better and more consistently. Not every civ can shine in every setting, and Malay, great civ on like Arena, great civ on water maps, just not really a super open aggressive Arabia. Malians, going to be going into the A- tier. They did get a little bit of a nerf in early game when they got the change where instead of having the free gold mining upgrade, they get gold mines last 30% longer. That was done because Bohemians get all of the mining camp upgrades for free, so the Malian bonus would literally be a worse version of the Bohemian bonus, and the devs try to avoid that whenever they can. So Malians, they get the longer lasting gold mines. You don't get the extra gold income right away, which is really nice when you're going for archer rushes or even knights and all that stuff. But the longer lasting gold does mean that in a long game you get more gold than your opponent. If you're under a lot of pressure and only have one safe gold mine, you can work with that one gold mine a lot longer. So it's still a strong bonus for Arabia, just not quite in early game. It's a more late game shifted bonus, or mid to late game. Beyond that, you have a great men-at-arm rush because of the extra pierce armor you get, and the strong eco regardless because all of your buildings cost minus 15% wood. They're also another civ that can go for the swordsman in mid-game and be pretty happy about that because you'll have 5 pierce armor on those bad boys. Again, underexplored option, just saying, guys. And again, you have a ton of variety. You can go for knights, camels, monks, infantry, archers, all that stuff. Late game is still a bit more awkward. You're just kind of missing like that super obvious power unit. Yes, you have cavaliers, heavy camels, like Cav with Farimba. That can all be good. Champ Scarls can be good, but they're still all a little bit more situational than a lot of other civilizations, so I don't think they can quite make it above the A- tier, but a very good, consistent civilization that's going to have very few bad matchups. Like, they're just a solid civilization. I am already starting to ramble. I was like doing better in the early in the video, and I was like, really just hitting home the points I need to make, but of course then I start to ramble. All right, Mayans, going to be going to the S tier. Mayans have always been great on Arabia. They always will be. Just some civilizations thrive on these open aggressive maps, and hey, Mayans are one of them. I do think they're a little bit worse than Aztecs, just because Aztecs are even faster than Mayans. The Aztec Eagle Warrior play, because they have the better farming economy, and they have the faster creation speed, especially in Feudal Age. I think Aztec Eagle Warrior play is a lot stronger, and Aztecs also have the better monks than Mayans. But Mayans, if they can make that transition to early to mid-Imperial Age, then Mayans are going to be stronger than Aztecs. They're a fantastic civ if they get a lame off successfully, because Incas, Aztecs, Mayans with that Eagle Scout, it's just a very consistent laming tool, and they get the extra benefit of their enemy's stolen rhino lasting longer, or elephant, or whatever. Again, these 3 civs, spoiler alert, these are the 3 S tier civs. They are picked and banned, I believe, in every single set in KotD4, and I think that is not without good reason, so these are just the 3 amigos for S tier. Mongols, A- tier. Mongols, I mean, it's kind of the case with Mongols right now is what it's always been. You have a very, very strong early game. You can lame really effectively. Even if you don't lame, you get the extra food on your elephants and rhinos. You can pretty comfortably lure in deer because of the extra line of sight. You can get all of your sheepers early on, make sure that those are nice and safe. And then you don't really have anything in mid-game until you get to Mangudai. I will say that they are a little bit more flexible than they used to be, as their cav archer play has seen a lot of a resurgence in the faster attack speed. It's really noticeable in mid-game. In late game, you miss ring archer armor, which means that your cav archers aren't quite, up to scratch, and you need to rely on the more powerful Magyars, which obviously you need castles for, so, it's tricky there. But mid-game, Mongol cav archers are going to be among the very, very best in the game. You don't even need to get a unique tech for it, you just get the faster firing cav archers. You also have the Steppe Lancer option, which I have seen work against Eagle Warriors especially. Steppe Lancers can be a really nice tool. They have extra HP with Mongols, again 30% more HP, 98 HP I believe with Bloodlines in mid-game, but you're still critically missing that eco bonus past early game, and then you don't have anything until late game with Magyars. Of course, if you get to Magyars, then you win against most civilizations, but it's a matter of getting there. I do think that Mongols are a bit better than Magyars, who you could see in a fairly similar way, because Mongols have a bonus in the Dark Age, so they can actually get to Feudal Age really fast. And then you also have a bonus for your cav archers in Castle Age, which is really nice. You have access to camels, which is really nice. So yeah, Mongols, they have their weaknesses that they've always had. They've had their strengths that they've always had. Maybe even a little bit more flexible in mid-game. Gonna be going in A- tier. Persians, C tier. Persians, I just feel bad for Persians. They're like the forgotten child of Age of Empires. It's like they're a cav civ, but other civs kind of have flashier bonuses. They don't have the cheap knights of Berbers. They don't get, Franks with their super, smooth, aggressive economy, and then Huns, Persians, they're just more focused on the heavy cavalry, focused on the mid to late game economy, where the faster working town centers becomes one of the best eco bonuses in the game. But you just don't have anything all that special going for you in early game. You do have the extra food and wood, which means you can actually go for a nice uptime with the civ. You can go for a nice aggressive drush, even decent men-at-arm rush as well. But other civs kind of do that and do that a bit better. It's said, I really enjoy playing Persians. You have camels as an option, you have Kamendar and crossbows and late game fully upgraded halberdiers and fully upgraded hussars. They have an amazing late game, but you just, other civs kind of do all of that stuff and can get to it more easily. So yeah, Persians, unfortunately, kind of falling victim to the fact that there's way more civilizations in AoE right now, and Persians are just more suited to closed maps a bit more, and hybrid maps. Portuguese, B- tier. Portuguese and Italians have a lot in common. Well, they both do gunpowder and ships, obviously, but as far as Arabia goes, you have a nice ability to go for knights and crossbowmen fairly comfortably in Castle Age because of your gold discount. The faster researching technologies can be quite nice. And you can go for a 3 militia drush without having to mine any gold, which is definitely a nice little early game tool that the civilization has to offer. But beyond that, you're just really generic. You are like the bargain brand generic civilization. You got the gold discount too, it's saving you money, getting your generic brand, whatever. They can play well, right? You can do good things with the civ. You've got Cavalier fully upgraded, you've got Arbalests fully upgraded and with discounts. Organ guns can be really, really good if you can get to a mass of them. You've got bombard cannons, halberdiers, they miss squires, which is really annoying, but you still have them. Elite skirmishers fully upgraded, light cav, just missing hussar. It's just, again, I do think that they're a little bit better than Persians, but they're just not flashy enough, I guess. They don't have those crazy strong power spikes that other civs have. Saracens, going to be going into the B tier unless you're Tato, then they go to S tier. But no, we're not Tato, unfortunately. Saracens are just, they're a little bit of a more wonky civ. You have the market bonus, which is incredibly powerful in some situations. In particular, the Gamer Legion members, other than Tato, but all of them, have been going for heavy market play in Feudal Age, where you sell your starting stone and then get to Castle Age that much more quickly and then use it to hit some sort of aggressive timing, and then you just buy back the stone later if you feel like you need to add additional town centers, and Saracens are one of the best civs at doing that. The extra archer attack versus buildings does mean that if you get a bunch of archers in Feudal Age, you can start knocking on the enemy's buildings, and they're going to have some sort of response to that. But still, you miss Halberdier, you miss Cavalier, and those are two very important tools in early to mid-Imperial Age. And then throughout the mid-game, you have good military options, but you don't have much of an economy. The market bonus, it can help you out, but it's no real substitute for something that is just consistent, like, say, the Celt faster working lumberjack bonus. So I think Saracens are just a pretty decisive B tier. Again, they are a civ that have access to fully upgraded heavy cav archers, which is a very nice tool in this current meta. Also fully upgraded hussars as well. Slavs, also going to be in the B tier. Slavs are obviously a, infantry, cavalry, siege sort of civilization, but they're not quite as fast as something like Celts. which is why I'd put them down a tier, although they have better cavalry, which is nice. And their eco is also a bit slower to get going. They're just kind of a slower, like, slowly ramp up in power throughout the game sort of civilization. But your eco doesn't really kick in until mid to late feudal age. I mean, you have the military buildings giving you 5 extra pop space, which, I mean, it's nice, but it's not amazing. I actually still think they're a little bit underplayed as to how good I think they can be. I don't really see Slavs as being like any worse than Berbers, for instance. Again, their swordsman play is pretty viable, I would say. You get the strong food eco and the free supplies upgrade. Yeah, I mean, supplies is cheaper now, but still, not having to spend the barracks time and research time, and resources, rather. It's really helpful. Like, I've done it on ladder, but obviously, again, I am big noob. And then in late game, you have fully upgraded hussars, halberdiers with druzhina potentially. Your skirmishers, although they miss bracer, do have ring archer armor, which means that you can at least hang in there against archer civs, but still lacking that solid archery range option, lacking arbalest, lacking bracer, does mean you're much more limited in terms of the strategies you can go for in mid-game and early Imperial Age on Arabia, and also you're a bit weaker against those super strong archer plays. So Slavs, a little bit slower, a little bit more situational, but still, they have the power units, right? You have really strong infantry, you have fully upgraded hussars, and late game, their eco is literally one of, if not the best late game economies. Okay, no, Burgundians are probably a bit better, but still, really good eco, and strong options in a lot of areas, but not in every area. Spanish, C tier. Gone are the days of the full tower rush meta. You can still go for tower rushes. It's not like it's impossible, but it's not very consistent, and you don't really have much of an eco bonus, and your archer play is bad since you miss Crossbowman. So you're kind of forced to go for conquistadors or knights or monks and stuff like that. Your infantry's pretty good, you got everything that you could want for it at the blacksmith and barracks, but still not really able to put themselves above C tier, unfortunately, just really missing that eco and that flexibility. Tater Tots, Tatars, gonna be in the A tier. Don't think that should be too surprising to anybody. Really love this civilization. You know, they are a steppe civ, cavalry cav archers, most relatable to civs like Mongols and Huns and Cumans. The strength of Tatars comes from, one, if you actually take enemy sheep, which is pretty common these days as players are being greedy and luring in their zebra and ostrich, which means that they do it before they find their sheep. So if you send your scout out, oftentimes you can find yourselves with 6 goats. Having those longer lasting goats is really, really nice. Delays your farming transition, so in situations where you can't afford horse color early on because you're going for quick archers or a quick men-at-arm rush, Tatars are okay in that they don't have to worry about placing farms before getting horse collar, which I know I'm focusing on horse collar a lot, but it's a really big deal. It's sort of a necessary sacrifice for most of these aggressive openings, and then Tatars are able to at least mitigate the issues as far as that goes, and just getting more food early on in feudal age is really nice. Other than that, their high ground bonus, Arabia these days, it's tons of hills. It's hills here, there, everywhere, especially around your opponent's economy, potentially, or even your own eco when it comes to defending. Fantastic. Cav Archer play. Free thumb ring. Amazing. It means your Cav Archers are much more useful in lower numbers because you're not missing all your shots, and you get the faster fire rate as well. And then for your Crossbowman free thumb ring, it's like getting the Ethiopian bonus, right? As soon as you hit Castle Age. It's even a little bit better, actually, because you get the 100% accuracy. Really good timings. You do have a bit of a long-term eco bonus as your town centers generate sheep when you construct them Castle Age onward, which is nice. Like, don't get me wrong, it's nice. But it's still not, you know, quite up there in terms of booming bonuses. But still, once you get to late game, you've got those cash money Keshiks, and you've got your amazing Cav Archers, really strong hussars, still just really strong civ at many stages in the game. Flexible, good civ. The Rootin' Tootin' Tootins. B- tier. Similar to Koreans, they actually have a very powerful economy, although it is kind of like Slavs, a little bit slower to get going. And there's a slow civ, right? You do have a strong potential mid-game with your extra melee armor on your cavalry and infantry. You have good monks, you're resistant to enemy monks, which can be nice in like big night wars, but you're slow. And mobility is kind of important on Arabia, so I don't think you can really put them anywhere above B- tier. You do likely need to adjust your playstyle to some degree when playing as the civilization. You know, they're a defensive civ, they're like Byzantines. Even something like Koreans and Incas to a degree as well. Past like early game and like crazy tower rushes, you kind of want to sort of sit on your back foot and then go for like one big push with castles with crenellations and like fortified walls at home even. It's just a different playstyle. It's not optimal, I would say, for Arabia, but it's totally doable. But still, it's just, they're a civ that's optimized for closed maps, and that's totally fine. Speaking of civs that are more optimized for closed maps, Turks, same dealio. Not having Elite Skirmisher is a huge problem for this civilization. More so than even missing pikemen. Missing Elite Skirmisher means that you're very vulnerable to archers in early to mid game. Now, this is mitigated to some degree by having your scouts with one more pierce armor, and of course the free light cav and hussar upgrades. It definitely does help, and otherwise the civ I would say in C tier. But you do have that option. It's still not ideal though, as making a lot of scouts in feudal age just delays your castle age time a lot, and although you have the faster working gold miners, that doesn't really help you make a lot of scouts. It helps you make your cav archers and gunpowder units and all that stuff, which is really strong with the civ. But then, even if you get across that late feudal age, early castle age hump, you could call it, then you run into, in post-imp, you don't have Elite Skirmisher, and you don't have pikemen, where not having pikemen becomes a big issue. In mid-game, your anti-cavalry options can come in the form of camels, which are fully upgraded with the civ, which is totally fine. So yeah, Turks, I would say B- tier, but if you play them on ladder, don't panic, but don't pick them either. Vietnamese, going to be in the A- tier. Man, look at this even distribution. Feels good, man. Vietnamese, I think, are surprising people with how successful they are, and they're kind of an underrated civilization. I do think they're actually stronger than Ethiopians, for instance, on this particular meta, not Empire Wars, King of the Desert Arabia generation. Knowing where your opponent's town center is, yes, you can go for laming really easily with the civilization. It's not something that you really need to be worried about for ladder play unless you're facing them. Even so, you have the eco upgrades that don't cost any wood. Is it the strongest eco bonus on the planet? No, but it's still a very noticeable eco bonus. It's good, right? And saving that wood early on can really help in terms of archer production and building archery ranges and blacksmiths and stuff like that. And having your archery range units take 2 more hits from most everything in early to mid game, it's a really good military bonus. They have one of the strongest, early game military bonuses. Kind of like Ethiopians in that degree, but Ethiopians don't quite, I would say, have as good of an eco as Vietnamese, but Vietnamese also have the option to go for cavalry in mid game. You have bloodlines, you have husbandry now, and you've got +2 defense and all that stuff. Yes, in late game you're missing Blast Furnace and Hussar, which is not super ideal, but you still have that option, more so than most other civilizations. And of course, with your extra HP, you have Imperial Skirmishers, Halbs that are mostly upgraded, Light Cav again that are at least pretty decent. They're a pretty strong civ. The Rattan Archers can be great, yeah. Even Elephants, potentially. I mean, I wouldn't put them higher than A- tier, but I do think they are a solid A- tier civilization, if that makes sense. And lastly, for the civs that I don't need to edit in, we will have the Vikings, who will find themselves in the A tier. Viking eco is still insane. They miss Thumbring now, but their infantry play is even stronger. It makes them even better in early feudal age men-at-arm rushes, because you have 54 HP men-at-arms and spearmen, which is very, very scary. And then behind that, you don't normally ever get Thumbring until like mid to late castle age, and so Vikings aren't really any worse until then, and you can still go for Arbalists just fine, right? Arbs without Thumbring, having full upgrades otherwise, it's the same as Khmer, and Khmer go for Arbs often enough. And Vikings, their Berserk switch is now way, way scarier. Yeah, those guys in mid-game, you have 1 melee armor, and you have 12 attack for an infantry unit, and you regenerate HP. Like, Berserks can work in Castle Age, guys. They're a scary, scary unit. Still, in late game, you are sad. You are a sad civilization as Vikings in late game. Very little mobility. It's really all about utilizing your incredible economy to getting some sort of early mid-game advantage and just kind of running away with that. So, good solid A tier civ. I wouldn't really put them in contention for S tier, though. Give me one moment, and some Ornlu editing magic will get you the rest of the civs. Alright, so with the power of Ornlu crappy Photoshop editing, sort of, I did add in all of the 4 newest civilizations post launch of AoE2 DE. Yeah, the font's a little bit different and the icons might not match up perfect, but it's close enough. You guys will have to deal with it. So going from bottom to top, we have Bohemians in the B- tier. They are a civ that have some potential, I think. The free gold and stone mining upgrades is very strong. stronger halbs as well, pikemen, spearmen, all that stuff. Chemistry for your crossbowmen in mid-game can be quite good, but we still run into this problem where they are a slower civilization. You have good monks, but monks aren't the most important on Arabia. Your cavalry is just terrible, and without thumb ring, it can be kind of difficult to really keep up until you can get chemistry, which is like kind of the same as thumb ring in terms of effect. And then even in Imperial Age, missing thumb ring means that your arbs are not fully upgraded, and then you have good halbs, but it's not really practical to get into Hofnitze most of the time. It's a bit of a more awkward civilization. Hussite wagons can be good, but yeah, I would still definitely put them in the B- tier. Not C tier, but definitely a bit on the lower end of things. Moving up to B tier, we have Poles, a civ that we have not really seen much of at all in KotD4. And I think that's in part just because they're new, and because the whole full work thing is a bit tricky to make work on a very aggressive setting. That said, you do have a strong men-at-arm tower rush with the stone miners generating gold, and then that can lead you into Obuks. Yes, their production time was nerfed, but the unit is still just as good as it's ever been. And you have good enough archer play, you have thumb ring, you have arbalest, bracer, you do miss ring archer armor, but still, you do have pretty good archers. And then you have your Schlachta privileges, knights in late Castle Age, which can be really deadly. You have your winged hussars, which can be really deadly. And now you even have siege engineers, which can help a bit with siege rams and trebs, I guess. So it's a civ that has a strong eco throughout the game. It's a bit difficult to like get going. Defending your early full work farming is hard on a map that's very hard to wall, so I don't think they get any higher than B tier, but I think that in terms of power level, they're pretty much on there with the civ like Berbers or Magyars or Saracens or something like that. Just a good all-around civilization. Now, jumping up to the A tier, we have both of the Lords of the West civilizations. We start with Burgundians, and they have a very, very good eco, it turns out. Getting those eco upgrades at half food price and an age earlier is really, really strong if you can hold on. It isn't the easiest thing in the world, and they're definitely not like an S-tier civ, but you aren't really the most aggressively inclined civ in the world. You can go for men-at-arms, but it's like you're kind of wasting Burgundians if you're doing that. You can go straight archers, but your archery range isn't all that good. You're very focused on Cavalier or Coustier in the mid-game, depending on whether or not you are playing super defensive and need to go for a castle, or if you're going to be more of an economic aggressive focus, then you go for Cavaliers. Both units can be super strong, but it is still what you really want to be doing. Your monks are okay. It's a civ that really thrives on its economy. Burgundian Vineyards is a low-key, fantastic technology that ensures you have good gold income throughout the entire game. Flemish Revolution, the button, I don't like it, but it is still a thing, and it's something that your opponent always has to keep in mind when you're playing against the civilization, and you have good gunpowder. So you do have options, especially once you get to the later stages of the game, but in like early to mid-game, you are most likely going to be on the defensive, and I have seen several Burgundians players just kind of get punished by strong aggressive civilizations. So great civ. Not quite perfect, of course. And last but not least, we will have the Sicilians, a very much, I guess, breakout civ, of KotD4, but it's also sort of a rejuvenated civ now that it has, well, you start with 100 more stone, which means that your ability to use the market and go up to Castle Age faster is just that much better. Of course, once you get to Castle Age, you have your faster building town centers, so you can get your eco going up much more quickly. The longer lasting farms with your, double farm bonus is just insane value in the long run. And then you have your knights that take, all of your units take minus 50% bonus damage, but it's most noticeable with knights because spearmen and camels get the most bonus damage against them relative to other units, I guess. And then you have Hauberk in early Imperial Age. It's a tech that I still think is too cheap, but it's very strong. It means that unless you have a really good melee unit, which a lot of civs have, even strong halb civs will be able to chew through Sicilian Cavalier, but it's not the easiest thing in the world to make work. We saw in a game ACCM fall to Jordan, I think, with the power of, ACCM had Camel Archers, although they didn't have full upgrades, and just kind of got swamped by Sicilians and their Hauberk Cavalier. Camels have a hard time trading against them. They're just such a strong unit. You also have the super speed building castles, insanely good tool offensively and defensively. Overall, a very flexible civilization. You do have arbalests, but you miss thumb ring and bracer. Or no, you have bracer, sorry. You miss thumb ring and ring archer armor. You have your DJs, your donjons, which are sometimes better and sometimes worse than towers, so they have their strengths and weaknesses. And then you do have sergeants as a potential, fully upgraded halberdiers, good siege as well, kind of mediocre monks, but just a great all-around, well-rounded civilization. But that is going to be it, guys. That is my KotD4 1v1 Arabia tier list. The ordering doesn't matter within the tiers themselves, like I don't think I actually said that. So yeah, I'm not saying Britons are any better or worse than Sicilians and vice versa and all that. So definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you will find it helpful when it comes to knowing how the civs work relative to each other on the current Arabia map. And yeah, thank you all for watching. Of course, definitely stay tuned for KotD, which is going to be this weekend and next weekend, I think it finishes up. And I will be casting that as well at Ornlu_AoE. So definitely swing by and say hi if you want to. Starts at 14 GMT. But most importantly, as always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.